Family, we live in a world where people think what happens in the dark stays in the dark. They believe that if nobody saw it, then it doesn't matter. But I came to remind you today that God's eyes see everything. You may hide things from people, but you cannot hide anything from God. You may clean up the outside, but God looks straight at the heart. Long before a word comes out of your mouth, God already knows what you're thinking. Long before a decision shows up in your actions, God has already seen it forming in your spirit. That truth can make some people uncomfortable, but for the child of God, it should bring comfort. Because when others misunderstand you, God sees. When you do the right thing and nobody claps, God sees. When you're tempted to quit, cut corners, or compromise, remember this, He sees it all. God's vision is not limited by walls, darkness, distance, or time. He sees your private life just as clearly as your public one. And here's the good news. God doesn't just see your failures. He sees your faith. He doesn't just see your mistakes. He sees your effort. He doesn't just see where you fell. He sees where you're trying to grow. So live in a way that honors God not only when people are watching, but especially when they're not. Because when you understand that God's eyes see everything, you start living with integrity, humility, and purpose. And when God sees a life fully surrendered to Him, He responds with guidance, correction, mercy, and blessing right on time. People often judge by what they can see on the surface. We look at appearances, titles, clothing, social media posts, or public behavior and assume we understand a person's life and character. But God does not operate with human vision. God sees beyond appearances and looks directly into the heart. While people may be impressed by outward success, confident words, or religious actions, God examines what is driving those actions from the inside. He sees thoughts that are never spoken, intentions that are never explained, and attitudes that are hidden behind smiles. A person can look faithful on the outside, yet be far from God on the inside. They can know the right words to say, show up at the right places, and follow the right routines, but still lack a sincere heart. God is not fooled by performance. He is not impressed by image management. What matters to Him is authenticity. When someone gives, God sees whether it is done out of love or out of a desire for attention. When someone serves, God knows whether it is motivated by humility or pride. Human eyes stop at behavior, but God's eyes move straight to motivation. This truth challenges the way many people live. It is easy to focus on looking good instead of being right. It is easy to polish the outside while neglecting the inside. But God's standard has always been heart first. He values obedience that flows from love, not actions driven by pressure or fear. He desires truth in the inward parts, not just public correctness. That means a quiet prayer offered with sincerity matters more to God than loud words spoken without meaning. A private decision to do what is right can carry more weight than a public display of righteousness. God's ability to see the heart also means He understands people more deeply than anyone else ever could. Others may misunderstand your intentions, mislabel your motives, or judge your actions unfairly, but God knows the truth. He sees the struggle behind the effort and the faith behind the fear. When someone is trying to grow, change, or overcome weakness, God sees that process even when progress feels slow. People may only notice the flaws, but God recognizes the direction of the heart. This kind of vision calls for honesty before God. Since nothing is hidden from Him, pretending becomes pointless. God invites people to come to Him as they truly are, not as they appear to be. Real transformation does not start with fixing behavior. It starts with surrendering the heart. When the heart changes, actions follow. God works from the inside out, shaping desires, renewing thinking, and aligning motives with His will. Living with the awareness that God sees beyond appearances also reshapes character. It encourages integrity because integrity means being the same person in private as in public. It teaches humility because there is no room for pride when God knows everything. It builds reverence because life is no longer about pleasing people but honoring God. When someone understands that God is watching the heart, not just the hands, they begin to live more intentionally, choosing honesty over hypocrisy and faithfulness over approval. In a world that rewards image, God rewards truth. In a culture that celebrates what looks good, God honors what is good. His eyes see beyond appearances, and that reality invites every person to stop performing and start living genuinely before him. Many people believe that secrecy gives them safety. If no one finds out, if nothing is exposed, if it stays hidden, then it feels as though there are no consequences. But God's eyes are not limited by human barriers. Nothing is hidden from him. Darkness does not block his sight, distance does not weaken his awareness, and silence does not erase reality. What is concealed from people is still fully visible to God. This truth applies not only to actions, but also to thoughts, attitudes, and decisions made in private. Long before something becomes public, it exists in the unseen place of the heart and mind. God sees that beginning stage. He sees the quiet compromises, the internal battles, and the moments when a choice could go in either direction. While people may only notice outcomes, God watches the process. He is aware of the moments when no one else is present, when accountability feels distant, and when temptation feels strongest. Understanding that nothing is hidden from God changes how a person lives. It removes the false comfort of secrecy. Private behavior matters just as much as public behavior because God is present in both spaces. The room may be empty of people, but it is never empty of God. This awareness brings accountability, not in a fearful sense, but in a truthful one. It reminds people that their lives are fully seen, fully known, and fully evaluated by a God who values righteousness. At the same time, this truth brings reassurance. God's complete awareness means that pain is never invisible. Tears shed in secret are noticed. Prayers whispered in solitude are heard. Struggles carried silently are not overlooked. When someone feels alone, misunderstood, or forgotten, God's vision becomes a source of comfort. He sees what others miss. He knows what others cannot know. No effort to do what is right goes unnoticed, and no act of faithfulness is wasted. God's ability to see everything also exposes the limits of human control. People often attempt to manage what others see while guarding what they do not want exposed. But before God, there is no edited version of life. There is no mask that can be worn. This reality invites surrender. Instead of hiding, God calls people to walk in openness before him. Confession replaces concealment, and honesty replaces denial. Freedom begins when someone stops trying to hide and starts trusting God with the truth. Nothing being hidden from God also reveals his patience and mercy. Even when he sees failure, he does not immediately abandon. Even when he sees weakness, he offers grace. God's vision is not just about judgment, it is also about guidance. He sees danger before it destroys. He sees patterns before they become prisons. Because he sees everything, he is able to correct, redirect, and restore. His awareness allows him to intervene at the right time, even when people do not realize they need help. Living with the understanding that nothing is hidden from God brings clarity to daily decisions. It encourages wisdom in small choices, not just big ones. It reminds people that character is formed in private moments, not public applause. When a person knows that God sees it all, they begin to value obedience even when it costs them something. They choose truth over convenience and faithfulness over secrecy, knowing that God's eyes are always open and his presence is always near. God does not only observe what people do, he understands why they do it. Actions are visible to others, but motives are often hidden even from the person acting. God sees both clearly. He sees the hands at work and the heart behind the movement. Two people can perform the same action, say the same words, or make the same sacrifice, yet God evaluates them differently because he weighs the motive that drives the behavior. Human judgment usually stops at outcomes. If something looks good, sounds right, or produces results, it is often praised. But God's evaluation goes deeper. He looks past the surface and examines intention. A good action done for the wrong reason does not carry the same value as a simple act done with a sincere heart. God is not impressed by activity alone. He is concerned with alignment, whether the heart is aligned with truth, humility, and obedience. Motives matter because they reveal who a person is becoming. Actions can be copied, but motives expose character. Someone may give generously, but God knows whether it is motivated by love or by the desire for recognition. Someone may lead confidently, but God sees whether that leadership flows from service or self-promotion. Even obedience can be corrupted when it is driven by fear, pressure, or the need to appear spiritual. God honors actions that flow from genuine devotion, not from obligation or image. This understanding calls for self-examination. It is possible to do the right thing for the wrong reason, and over time, that disconnect creates spiritual emptiness. When motives are unhealthy, even good actions can become burdensome. God invites people to bring not just their behavior before Him, but their intentions as well. He desires honesty about why choices are being made. Transformation deepens when motives are purified, not just when habits are adjusted. God's awareness of motives also brings comfort. There are times when a person's actions are misunderstood or misinterpreted by others. People may question intentions, assign blame, or assume the worst. But God knows the truth. He understands the heart behind the effort. He sees when someone is trying, even if the outcome is imperfect. He recognizes faith expressed through weakness and obedience offered through struggle. When motives are pure, God affirms what others may criticize. Seeing both actions and motives means God also addresses issues before they become visible problems. A wrong motive left unchecked can eventually produce harmful behavior. God often works quietly, convicting the heart, redirecting desires, and reshaping priorities, long before anything changes outwardly. His correction begins internally, guiding people toward healthier reasons for living, serving, and believing. This internal work protects individuals from hypocrisy and burnout. Living with an awareness that God sees motives encourages humility. There is no room for pride when God knows the real reason behind every success. It also encourages sincerity because pretending becomes unnecessary. Life becomes less about impressing people and more about pleasing God. When motives are aligned with truth, actions naturally follow in the right direction. Obedience becomes a response of love, not a performance for approval. God's vision of motives ultimately invites deeper relationship. He wants hearts that seek Him, not just hands that work for Him. When people allow God to shape their motives, their actions gain meaning, their faith gains depth, and their lives reflect authenticity. God sees both what is done and why it is done, and that reality calls every person to live from the inside out, with a heart fully open before Him. Knowing that God sees everything introduces a level of accountability that goes deeper than rules or supervision. It is not about being watched by people or fearing consequences from others. It's about living with the awareness that every choice is made before God. Accountability begins in the heart, shaping decisions even when no one else is present. When someone understands that God sees all, integrity becomes a daily commitment rather than an occasional effort. This awareness challenges the idea that character only matters in public spaces. True accountability is revealed in private moments, when shortcuts seem easy and compromise feels convenient. God's vision reminds people that private decisions are just as important as public ones. What is done when no one is watching still carries weight. Integrity means consistency, being the same person in secret as in the spotlight. God's eyes remove the gap between public image and private reality. Accountability to God also redefines standards. Instead of asking, "Can I get away with this?" the question becomes, "Does this honor God?" This shift changes how people approach choices, relationships, and responsibilities. Decisions are no longer measured only by immediate results, but by long-term faithfulness. God's presence becomes the guiding influence, encouraging wisdom, restraint, and honesty, even when compromise would be easier. This kind of accountability is not meant to produce fear, but clarity. God's standard provides direction in moments of confusion. When faced with pressure to conform, cut corners, or follow the crowd, knowing that God sees everything strengthens resolve. It gives courage to stand alone if necessary, trusting that obedience matters more than approval. Accountability to God anchors behavior in conviction rather than convenience. God's vision also exposes areas that need growth. Accountability means being willing to acknowledge weakness, admit failure, and accept correction. Since nothing is hidden from God, there is no benefit in denial. Instead, accountability invites humility. It opens the door for repentance and change. God's correction is not about punishment alone. It is about restoration. He holds people accountable because he is invested in their growth. Living with accountability to God also builds trustworthiness. When a person consistently chooses integrity, then in unseen moments, character is strengthened. Over time, this integrity influences how others experience them. While accountability begins with God, its effects often extend into relationships, leadership, and responsibility. People who live accountable lives become reliable, steady, and principled because their choices are rooted in something deeper than personal gain. This awareness also guards against hypocrisy. Hypocrisy thrives when there is a separation between what is shown and what is lived. God's all-seeing nature removes that separation. It calls people to align belief with behavior and faith with action. When accountability is embraced, faith becomes genuine rather than performative. Actions reflect conviction, not just appearance. God's vision invites daily reflection. It encourages people to examine their motives, choices, and attitudes regularly. Accountability becomes a rhythm of life, not a reaction to failure. By living before God with openness and honesty, individuals grow in maturity and self-discipline. They learn to take responsibility for their actions, knowing that God's standard is fair, just, and rooted in love. Ultimately, accountability to God leads to freedom. When someone no longer lives to hide or impress, they are free to live truthfully. Integrity removes the burden of maintaining false images. God's eyes, seeing everything is not a threat, it is a guide. It leads people toward lives marked by consistency, faithfulness, and respect for God's authority in every area of life. Knowing that God sees everything is not only a call to accountability, it is also a source of deep comfort. For many people, life includes moments when effort goes unnoticed and faithfulness feels invisible. There are seasons when doing the right thing brings no recognition, no applause, and no immediate reward. In those moments, the truth that God sees becomes reassuring. Even when people overlook your obedience, God does not. Even when your work feels hidden, God's eyes are fixed on it. God's comfort comes from the fact that his vision is personal and attentive. He does not merely see events, he sees people. He notices the quiet sacrifices that never make headlines, the prayers whispered when words are hard to form, and the strength it takes to keep going when circumstances are heavy. While others may only see results, God sees effort. While others may focus on outcomes, God honors faithfulness. Nothing done with a sincere heart is wasted in his sight. This truth is especially meaningful in times of hardship. When pain is private and struggles are carried alone, it is easy to feel forgotten. But God sees the tears that fall in secret and the questions that remain unanswered. He understands burdens that are never explained to others. His awareness brings comfort because it reminds people that they are never truly alone. God's presence extends into every hidden space, offering strength where human support may be absent. God's vision also brings comfort when life feels unfair. There are times when wrong actions seem to go unpunished and right actions seem unrewarded. People may manipulate systems, distort truth, or take credit for what they did not do. In those moments, trusting that God sees everything prevents bitterness from taking root. God's justice is not limited by time or visibility. He sees what is overlooked, and he responds in ways that align with his perfect wisdom. Comfort also comes from knowing that God sees growth, not just perfection. People often judge progress harshly, focusing on flaws and failures. God, however, sees the direction of the heart. He notices when someone is trying to change, even if they stumble along the way. He recognizes small steps of obedience that others dismiss. This kind of ion encourages perseverance. Instead of giving up because progress feels slow, people can keep moving forward, knowing God values sincerity over speed. God's comforting vision also reassures those who feel misunderstood. Intentions are often misread, and words are sometimes twisted, but God knows the truth. He understands motives and context completely. When others question character or doubt sincerity, God's knowledge becomes a steady anchor. His approval carries more weight than public opinion. Living with that assurance frees people from the constant need to defend themselves or prove their worth. This comfort does not remove responsibility, but it balances it with hope. God's eyes see failures, yet they also see potential. He does not define people solely by their weakest moments. Instead, he works patiently, guiding, correcting, and restoring. His awareness is paired with mercy. Because he sees everything, he knows exactly how to help, when to intervene, and what is needed for growth. Living with the understanding that God sees everything transforms fear into trust. It allows people to rest in the knowledge that their lives are fully known and fully cared for. When no one else notices, God does. When no one else understands, God does. His vision brings comfort that steadies the heart, strengthens faith, and reminds every believer that their life, their effort, and their faith matter deeply to him.